So, we've finally reached the end of the Xenosaga series. Now, as the 6th console generation comes to a close, let's look back on the final chapter of the Xenosaga series, 2006's Xenosaga Episode 3, also Sprach Zarathustra. Despite my own personal opinions, Xenosaga Episode 2 wasn't particularly well received by fans. It was also not well received by Monolithsoft's founder, Tetsuya Takahashi. This led the Xeno series creator to take a much more inclusive role in overseeing the development of future Xenosaga games. This was done to keep the game's story more in line with his original vision. Following Episode 2's release, the scrapped elements from the original game's script would be reworked into 2 projects. The first was a mobile phone game called Xenosaga Pied Piper, which told the backstory of Xenosaga, the man who would eventually become the cyborg Ziggy. The second was a series of flash movies titled Xenosaga: A Missing Year, which covered the events between episodes 2 and 3. Both these projects would be exclusively released in Japan only, which would be a problem, as several crucial story details would be later referenced in episode 3, with expectations that the player already knew what had happened. Episode 3 was designed not only to wrap up the trilogy, but also to fix problems that had been present in the previous 2 Xenosaga games, such as the battle system and story progression. Its subtitle would keep with the series' tradition of book titles of Friedrich Nietzsche, this time going with his novel Also Sprach Zarathustra, or Thus Spoke Zarathustra in English. This is not to be confused with the classical orchestral piece by Strauss, although I guess they are kind of similar in which both are used in sci-fis with strange monolith things. Being the first part of what was meant to be a 6-part story, Xenosaga Episode 3's plot would be edited so far beyond belief that Xenosaga's co-writer, Kaori Tanaka, would express in an interview that Episode 3 had very little in common with what she had originally envisioned. Koichi Miyajitani would yet again design the characters and mechs, but would take on the criticism that Episode 2's realistic character designs had received, and would attempt to make the characters look much more like what they did in Episode 1. Episode 3 would be announced in 2005 alongside Xenosaga Episode 1 and 2, a Nintendo DS remake of the first 2 Xenosaga games, which featured major changes by Takahashi on the second game's story. It quickly became well known that Xenosaga Episode 3 was going to be the last game in the series due to declining sales. The game's localization would be one of the first projects of the new company 8-4. 8-4 would infamously censor the game by removing all the blood from the game, which led to some scenes losing context. This would not be the last time that 8-4 would do such a thing in a Xeno game, as we will see later. Despite Episode 2 releasing in Europe, the now merged Bandai Namco decided not to release Episode 3 there, meaning to this day, Xenosaga Episode 2 is the only non-Xenoblade game available in the PAL regions. So let's see how the Xenosaga Trilogy comes to a close. The story starts 21 years ago, where we see the planet Micdom, overrun by the Gnosis. Here we meet a young Kevin Winnicott, Shion's future fiancé and designer of Cosmos, as he and his mother attempt to flee the planet. At the spaceport, Kevin's mother puts him into an escape pod with her pendant and then seals the pod without getting in. Kevin then watches in horror as she turns into a Gnosis in front of his very eyes, before he is then shot into space and away from the planet. The story then jumps to the present day where we see the 4 Testaments, servants of Vector CEO Wilhelm, excavating a mysterious stone coffin while discussing their plans about fixing the mistakes that happened at Milsha 14 years ago. Meanwhile, Shion is attempting to infiltrate Vector's servers in the UMN, a sort of alternate dimensional internet world. Helping Shion is her friend Miyuki, along with Kanan and Doctus, an agent for the anti-UMN group Skentia. Inside, Kanan starts downloading the data while Shion explains to Miyuki that she believes Vector did not build the UMN, but discovered it, despite claiming the former, and believes there is a connection between the UMN and the Gnosis, which Vector is hiding. They are just able to collect all the data when the Gnosis show up, forcing them to flee. Shion is then revealed to have been accessing the UMN from a remote tropical beach. Damn, that looks good. The beach, I mean. Shion contacts the others to confirm they have all the data, and then afterwards checks her emails to find one from Alan. Alan explains that he and the Cosmos project have been transferred over to the Federation military on 5th Jerusalem, while they develop a newer model battle android. Alan then ends the email with an invitation for Shion to join him on 5th Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast have been sent to investigate the appearance of a strange landmass called Renula's Chateau that is believed to have come from Lost Jerusalem. There, the group are ambushed by Margulis in the ES Levi. During the fight, a hypersphere begins to form around the landmass. The group attempt to flee, but Margulis damages one of the Elsa's engines, causing it to fall into the hypersphere and become trapped. Margulis then receives new orders to retreat, and reluctantly tells the cast that they should probably try to rescue their friends. Meanwhile, Xion takes off from a secluded beach in the ES Diner, and plots a course towards 5th Jerusalem. While in hyperspace, Xion recounts the events of Xenosaga a missing year, which just leaves you wondering why this stuff wasn't in episode 2, because it sounds really interesting. In the monologue, Xion explains how she met Doctus and Scientia and uncovered how Vector was involved with the increase in Gnosis activity. This in turn led her to quit Vector and start investigating the truth behind the Gnosis and all the other events going on. At 5th Jerusalem, we finally get the title card. I guess they were copying Lord of the Rings in more ways than one. Xion lands at the Dot Colony, then descends to the planet's surface to meet up with Alan. The two's reunion is cut short when Alan is ordered back to the testing facility to prep for the upcoming demonstration of Cosmos. Xion then meets up with Chaos, who has just gotten back from Rennes Chateau, and explains to Xion the situation there before Xion suddenly passes out. Xion awakens the next day in her hotel when she realises that she is going to be late for the demonstration. Luckily, Alan is waiting for her and escorts her to the testing facility. There, Xion gets to witness the new android the Federation has developed, called Telos, as she destroys a horde of Gnosis with ease. Afterwards, Cosmos is brought out to fight a giant mech called Omega Res Novare. During the fight, Omega goes berserk and Cosmos gets hit while protecting the viewing audience from a blast. Afterwards, Xion returns to a hotel while Alan goes to the lab to fix up Cosmos. There, Alan is rudely informed by Telos' creator Roth Mantel that Cosmos is to be scrapped. Meanwhile, Xion gets summoned to meet up with the other cast members to discuss an idea on how to rescue the Elsa. They plan to use Cosmos' tertiary weapon system to break up the hypersphere so they can get to the Elsa. Alan then informs Xion about Cosmos' situation, and in response the group decides to break into the testing facility and steal Cosmos before she gets scrapped. Whew! I really want to cover more of this amazing story, but unfortunately I won't be able to in this video. Remember to check out Oni Black Mage, who has done a really good job at recapping both Xenogears and the Xenosaga Trilogy. Link to his video in the description below. Straight from the get-go, Episode 3 looks incredible. Hell, if this game wasn't forced to run through an AV cable, I think you could pass this game off as an early PS3 title. The graphical improvements can easily be seen in things like the city overworlds that are now in full 3D, as well as the new, more detailed character models. The cast has never looked better. By combining the realistic models of Episode 2 with the anime models of Episode 1, Xenosaga Episode 3 has found a nice middle ground and arguably has the best looking characters. I particularly love Cosmos version 4, who also happens to be my favourite video game character of all time. Along with Cosmos, the rest of the cast from Episode 2 returns to give us a total of 7 main characters. Despite no newcomers joining the party, Miyuki, Kanan and Alan will all become playable at select moments in the game. As a fan of the series, finally being able to play these characters was really cool, especially Alan, whose frequent appearances in game as Shion's assistant leaves you wondering why he's never been playable before. Despite the cast returning and the fact that Episode 3 is still a linear RPG with a lot of cutscenes, the game feels quite different from the rest of the Xenosaga series. This is due to a combination of changes, including the battle system, which I will cover soon, and other small changes, such as talking to an NPC via picking up on keywords, as opposed to just initiating conversations. Another change is in how cutscenes are handled. Episode 3 decides to abandon a lot of its more cinematic cutscenes in favour of lengthy text box exchanges. These are not as bad as it sounds, as these exchanges are fully voiced, and they are hardly a downgrade from the long dialogue cutscenes in the previous 2 games. Despite being cut back on, the cinematic cutscenes are still present, and now support a sweet widescreen format. That is then ruined by being squeezed to fit a PS2 standard definition screen, with subtitles. Not to worry, because video editors give us the gift of cropping. There, that looks better. Episode 3 also features a lot of new locations we have never seen before, such as the giant metropolises of 5th Jerusalem and the mysterious ruins of Rennes Chateau. These locales will be traversed both on foot and in ES units, which make their return from Episode 2. The pilots and co-pilots are now fixed to their ES units, with Xion and Cosmos in the ES Diner, Junior and Chaos in the ES Asher, Momo and Ziggy in the ES Zebulun, and Jin by himself in the brand new ES Reuben. The ES sections for the most part play the same as they did in Episode 2, with dedicated boarding and disembarking points. However, they are more present in game than they were back in Episode 2, which is great because they were definitely underused in Episode 2. Despite making a lot of changes from the Xenosaga formula, Episode 3 still has several series staples, such as segment addresses and Erde Kaiser, who thankfully is not locked to the post-game, The game also takes a few cues from Episode 1 specifically, by returning to a more story-focused game and abandoning the GS mission side quests from Episode 2. It also brings back minigames in the form of Hackox, a block puzzle game in which you must get the cast members, both main and side, from spawn points to goals by moving blocks around. Unlike with Episode 1's minigames, I really like Hackox, as it's both a fun game and it generates rewards that can be used in battle. Speaking of battle, battle initiations are another feature that has been changed in Episode 3. For one, traps are no longer found on the ground in dungeons. Instead, you carry a stockpile of 10 that can be placed on the ground and detonated to stun enemies. The player can also walk into the backs of enemies to trigger back attacks, at which at the start of battle the enemy will be facing backwards, thus allowing the party to attack first with increased damage. It should also be noted that the enemy can do back attacks as well. Xenosaga Episode 3 decides to commit sacrilege by abandoning the combo system that was all but staple until this point and replacing it with a more classical JRPG battle system. Characters can conduct a regular attack, or they can use tech attacks which now cost EP and work in the same fashion as ether spells, which also make their return as well. Characters also have the option of guarding, using an item, as well as fleeing the battle. Additionally, characters now have easy access to equipment that can permanently show an enemy's elemental affinity, meaning you no longer need to remember every enemy's weakness. Braking returns from Episode 2, however, instead of the zoning system, the enemy will now have a break gauge which will be filled up by attacks. Certain tech attacks will do more break damage at the cost of less HP damage. Once the gauge is filled, the enemy will enter a break status, whereabouts they will be unable to move and will be vulnerable to increased damage. It should also be noted that your characters can also be put into a break status, and thus you should make use of break healing to prevent that from happening. Despite the major changes to the battle system, boosting makes its return in much the same form as it was in Episode 2. Both you and the enemy will be able to boost, however the enemy don't seem to boost as much as they did in the previous two games. Boosts can also be used by your characters to unleash powerful special attacks. If a special attack deals the killing blow to an enemy, you will get a finishing strike bonus, which will net your party extra experience and skill points at the end of battle. Speaking of skill points, so we've gone from 3 types of bonus points in Episode 1 to 2 types in Episode 2, and now here we only have skill points. Skill points are used on the character's new skill line, in which the character can unlock new techs and ether attacks as well as stat boosts. The skill line is split into 2 lines, an A line focusing on the character's primary playstyle, e.g. Momo as a spellcaster, and the other focusing on the character's secondary playstyle, e.g. Momo as a bowmaster. By completing a line, the character will unlock a master skill, which comes in the form of a powerful tech or ether attack the character can use. Also, as the game goes on, characters will gain the ability to unlock EX skills, which are skills normally reserved for other characters. Along with the foot battles, ES battles also make their return. The fuel mechanic from Xenogears is also brought back, however, here it is used as an attack limiter. ES units will have the choice between multiple attacks, with differing properties and fuel costs. They can then use as many attacks as they can afford in fuel. This is kind of a switcheroo from Episode 2, in which the ES battles are now based around combos while the foot battles aren't. ES units also have an anima gauge which fills up for an eventual maximum of 3 charges. An ES can go into an anima awakened state at varying levels depending on how many gauges it consumes. In an awakened state, the ES will be able to conduct longer combos with increased damage. They will also gain access to ES variants of special attacks, which also have the finishing strike property. ES units also have the ability to follow up each other's attacks, as well as charge up to regain health, however they do not have the ability to boost, nor be revived in battle. In the event an ES unit is defeated, the 4th ES in reserve will take the place of the defeated unit, however this only happens once per battle. Xenosaga 3's battles are both fast and fun, but what makes them even more epic is the soundtrack that goes along with them. Yuki Kajura is back from Episode 2 as the sole composer for Episode 3, writing both the cutscene and gameplay music. Xenosaga Episode 3 would be Kajura's last foray into video games, as to date she has never done one since. This is a real shame because Episode 3's music is awesome. Kajura takes a lot of the pieces she had written for Episode 2 and rearranges them into Episode 3's soundtrack. This helps create a Xenosaga musical identity and also makes the pieces iconic. Pieces like Fatal Fight and Sweet Song, which both make reappearances in this game. Kajura would also add to the score several original pieces, such as the new battle themes Fallout and Survive, as well as the one and only battle of your soul. This theme in Project Cross Zone, be it in a compressed form, almost single-handedly got me to play the Xenosaga Trilogy, and to this date it is still my favourite Xeno piece. Kajra would also bring the Xenosaga Trilogy to a close with her ending song of Maybe Tomorrow, which, much like Sweet Song, is teased to us beforehand in several scenes. New York singer and songwriter Emily Curtis would supply the English vocals for this piece, and to this date it remains one of my favourite ending songs in the series, regardless of what this guy thinks. Worst vocal theme in the series? Get After playing episode 1 and 2, I began asking myself why Monolithsoft was a game company and not an animation studio. With the first two games' exclusive focus on story over quality gameplay, I began wondering why Xenosaga wasn't just an anime series. However, Xenosaga Episode 3 reminds me why I love this series so much, as it completely blows away both previous Xenosaga games in almost every factor. Battles are fast and streamlined, the gameplay music is really good, and the story is gripping, and for the first time we finally have a Xenosaga game that's actually worth playing. Monolithsoft truly did take the previous game's criticisms to heart and made a great Xeno game, which in my opinion even exceeds Xenogears. At the end of the day, Episode 3 is the Xenosaga game I always wanted the series to be. However, Episode 3 is not a perfect game. Being the climax of what was meant to be a 6-part series, the game's story feels like multiple stories fused together. This is especially true in the final acts of the game, where the story seems to jump randomly between multiple plots with little connecting them together. Another problem is in the characterization of the cast. There's just something off a bit with the characters' personalities when comparing them with the previous games. Jin seems to have lost his quirkiness, meanwhile Junior can't seem to not shout every word he is saying, even if it's discussing a secret break into a military facility.
Okay, we should get started too! There's not much time. Stock up on anything you'll need.
Dude, do you want the entire Federation to hear you? Meanwhile, the biggest change in character has to go to Shion, who can become quite irritating, especially in the later parts of the game, where she seems to become extremely ignorant and self-centered to the point of becoming completely unlikable. This results in a scene right at the end of the game, which I won't spoil, in which one's reception will be mixed depending on how much you've grown to hate Shion. However, this is not to say the cast is weak, far from it. They are still an excellent cast. And even if the main cast is a bit off, the side characters have never been stronger. The Testaments are all menacing foes, and newcomer Telos takes on an excellent role as Cosmos' antagonistic doppelganger. In fact, Telos has arguably become more well known than most of the Xenosaga cast par Cosmos herself, due to her appearances in Project Cross Zone and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. If I haven't made it clear enough, I love Xenosaga Episode 3. However, my love for this game is bittersweet, due to its status as the final project in the Xenosaga series. Had Episode 3 been another Episode 1 or 2, I would happily leave this mediocre trilogy of games behind and move on to the Xenoblade Chronicles games. But due to Episode 3 being so amazing, I'm left upset that the Xenosaga series ended here. Perhaps I should be happy though that the series ended on such a high note. Well, with the Xenosaga Trilogy coming to a close, it looks like the good times are over, but in fact we are just getting started as I come back next time to cover my favourite game in the series, Xenoblade Chronicles.